Welcome to Blind Level Tech. This isn't just accessible tech talk. This is technology on a whole new level. We're showing you just how possible it is to live the life you want.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Blind Level Tech. I am your host, Evan Starnes. I just have to say, for you audio geeks out there, you probably won't notice it because I've already produced this episode, but I am actually using the built-in sound card on this computer, and I'm quite impressed with its quality. I used to be, you use a built-in sound card, you get a lot of rumble, hiss, bus noise, those little beeps and boops and things that you don't like. Built-in Realtek sound cards, they're typically Realtek, have come quite a long way. So I'm running this Rodecaster mic through a Behringer Eurorack interface, mostly just using that as a preamp and a preamp and a slight EQ just to bump up the treble a little bit, and just running the headphone output of that through the line in on the sound card. And I don't know, it's almost mitigated the need for me to have a dedicated audio interface. I cannot believe I'm saying that. This is going to be a slightly different type of episode, and I'm kind of just trying this as an experiment per se. It's been quite a while since we've done any reporting on the latest tech news and innovations, and with the week being fairly quiet guest-wise, and I have a lot of guests actually scheduled in the future, but between now and then, I needed some topics to cover, and so I was kind of looking around and looking at episodes that I'd done in the past, and kind of thought, this would be a good idea to, go handpick a few different stories, report on them, and provide some personal examples and thoughts on them as well. Now, let's be clear, this is not an opinion show at all. Opinions are expressed sometimes, but it will be very clear if what I'm saying is an opinion or not. I do not intend to endorse or condone or promote anything. We're just here to report on tech news, provide some useful examples, and, have fun while doing it. Now, with that being said, I wanted to start off the show with what I like to call a couple little rambles, or maybe we could call them fillings because it's a sandwich theme show, but oh gosh, that makes me think of the dentist, and I don't think we want to think about that now. But a couple things first. Yesterday, actually, I was just in my office, and Penn, the development and outreach director, walked in with an old device, and to us it just looked like a big plastic box. But upon opening it, I found out that it was an original Versa Braille system. And that is actually probably, to my knowledge, the first of its kind ever Braille note taker that was made in 1979. And this is great because finally, I think I've got enough material, and once I can find a good guest, to do my throwback episode. I have been wanting to do a BLT throwback episode for almost 2 years now, actually, mostly because I have a large affinity for old assistive tech, and honestly, for that matter, just what would be considered vintage and old tech. I'm not going to say obsolete. And I've wanted to do something to just kind of go over things like old book players, talking clocks, Braille note-taking devices, just any kind of assistive tech from probably the 50s all the way to the very early 2000s, as, generations like myself might not know about some of this stuff and might not appreciate it yet. But it is, the way that it is how we've gotten to the point where we are now with our Android-enabled Braille note-taking devices, smart glasses, and other things. But now that I have that, once I get it working, it's definitely going to be part of that throwback episode. So I'm super excited. Now I just have to find a good guest. Also, I just must provide a testament to the waterproofing or water resistance on Apple's second generation AirPods Pro, and I'm sure the third generations are even better. But I was doing the laundry last week, and a couple little things fell out of my pants pocket into the washer. Reaching into the bottom of the washer, I found my 2 AirPod Pros, and they were slightly damp. And this is because me being me and, being doing what I do, I had my AirPods in at one point, and I think my girlfriend called to me or something, and I took them out, and rather than putting them in the case, which was in my bedroom, I put them in my pocket. And this is not the first time I've done that. And I forgot that they were just loosely sitting in my pants pocket, and so they went through the laundry. This is the second time that these AirPods have gone through the washing machine. I thought I had lost them, and so I took the air tips off and I let them dry for about 2 days. This is going to sound weird, but I kind of I blew water or kind of sucked whatever I could out of the grills, the microphones and stuff. And I put them in their case thinking, oh man, these things are dead. And I put them in, and you wouldn't even realize that they'd gone through the washer. So way to go, Apple. Would I recommend washing your AirPods in the washing machine? Absolutely not. But hey, if they end up in your pocket and they end up in the washer, at least you might not be out a pair of AirPods Pros. Now let's go ahead and jump into some tech news and updates here, because we've got a few little stories to talk about, starting with something that I'd briefly touched on last week during our self-checkouts episode. If you're still on iOS 26.0 and you're a VoiceOver user and you haven't been impacted by the bug in which VoiceOver may become disabled for some users, consider yourself lucky, and also consider upgrading to iOS 26.0.1 as it fixes that issue. And I personally was impacted by that issue just once. And if you are impacted by that issue, I would not recommend using the triple click accessibility shortcut, mostly because I have seen people accidentally activate their SOS before. And I know we talked about that a few episodes back. But if VoiceOver happens to become disabled and Siri will not turn it on and off, and there's just nothing you can do, there's no way to get it back, restart your phone and do a hard reset. And the way to do that on any iPhone from the iPhone 10 and later, so any iPhone that doesn't have a home button, is you need to press the volume up, then the volume down in succession, then hold the power button for a little over 10 seconds. If you have light perception, you'll notice the screen go dark and then really bright. If you have an iPhone 14 or newer and you have the startup sound turned on, you'll hear the startup chime. And VoiceOver will be or should be restored by the time your phone restarts. And, well, then go upgrade to iOS 26.0.1. I have been using iOS 26.0.1 for a couple of weeks now, and a lot of the issues that I'd had in iOS 18 mostly with VoiceOver, where sometimes my speech would just stop working if I'd been reading long pieces of text or browsing social media really quickly, I haven't been impacted by that as much. And I have found the speech at least to be a little bit more snappy than it was prior, and it has felt a lot more, well, quite a bit more stable than iOS 18. So I don't think you guys will run into any issues with iOS 26.0.1. And iOS 26.1 is definitely in beta. And actually, at the time of this episode's release, it's probably going to be out next week, maybe. Now, speaking of Apple, they also have just come out with new M5 devices. And the M chip is what's used in things like iPads, Macs, and Vision Pro, of course, too. And so they've unveiled some new M5 iPads, some new M5 MacBooks, and also now a new M5 enabled Apple Vision Pro. And we'll save all of these for a future episode next week with Marty Sobo, but I'm definitely curious to know what exactly the M5 brings from the M4 and if I should finally upgrade my M1 Max, which are now about 5 years old. Next up, Be My Eyes has launched a new service called Service AI. And this is basically a service that if you are a small or medium business owner, that you can integrate into your business to work with customers and help answer questions, describe things, or just provide any sort of technical assistance. And it is an AI chat agent. And I guess the advantages of this over your other, typical chat agents are, let's say you are trying to figure out maybe a new dishwasher or something you got. If you call the company and they happen to have this service, perhaps this would make it a lot better for describing where buttons are located, and it would eliminate the need to say, oh, sorry, I'm blind or have low vision. Because at least from my past experiences when calling customer support, that's something you always have to disclose. And it's actually not going to be something that you would, call over the phone. It's going to be part of the services directory in the Be My Eyes app. And I'm really excited to see what it's like when, once it's actually taken off and businesses have started to integrate it. And also it means that it's time to have Joe Weber on for another Be My Eyes updates episode, because we actually did an on-the-spot interview at the Aftersight hike on my Meta glasses. And they're also doing work on a desktop app. So we're going to have him on to talk about that. And the next thing I wanted to talk about, and I was kind of debating on putting this in BLT, but I was just impressed by it and I really wanted to share it with you guys. I was reading Top Tech Tidbits and I stumbled across, there's a lot of smart glasses. I think we're in the age of wearables, especially of smart glasses. And I've been hearing a lot about new ones like the Rockets, of course, the Echo Vision, which are still in pre-order, and these new ones called Dot Lumen. And dot is actually a period. So yeah, period Lumen. And unfortunately, they're only being tested in Romania, but these glasses are really useful for navigating. And basically, verbatim, the way they describe it is they've taken a lot of the technology that is used by autonomous vehicles and integrated it into these glasses. Because, typically your smart glasses that you see, your Meta Ray-Bans or whatever it might be, are fantastic for describing images, reading text, identifying people in some cases, but they've not been great for orientation and mobility purposes. However, these glasses are unique because that's actually kind of their specialty. In fact, what they do is they take a combination of sound and haptic feedback to allow you to navigate paths. It'll use haptic feedback on the right or left side of your face to tell you if you need to make a right or left turn. This is pretty cool because there's an idea I'd had a while ago, actually, when I'd heard about things like the Glide, or, a long time ago, the Sunu band, which I still have. Unfortunately, they are no longer with us. But I had always wondered, would it be possible to make a pair of augmented reality glasses that are designed to make navigation easier by turning objects like walls, shelves, people, things like that into distinct sound cues and, panning them around positionally. And I kind of got this idea from just playing various audio games, from things like Manamon to Crazy Party to Survive the Wild, all these different games that allow you to walk around a map and you can hear exactly where you are, and certain things like walls make certain sounds. It would be really cool to have something like that in real life. I'm not sure how feasible it'd be, but it would be interesting. But it seems like the designers behind the Dot Lumen glasses have done something pretty similar. Now, I haven't found a lot on how these glasses work specifically, but it is unique because It's been a while since I've actually seen like haptic technology integrated into smart glasses. Usually they solely rely on sound, and I have the feeling this means that they'll probably be a little bit better for those who are deaf or hard of hearing as well. So hopefully they'll make their way over to the United States, but for now they're only being tested in Romania, but they've sold over 1,500 of these things. So I don't know. I would love to see a demo at some point and maybe get somebody from Lumen or the company behind them on BLT in spite of that fact, just because this is really cool technology. And I think we're getting closer and closer to AI and these technologies being used for, everyday navigation and route planning and orientation. Of course, I'll always say, this will never really replace things like a white cane or a guide dog, but they definitely they are really interesting, and who knows? I mean, the speed that AI and this technology is progressing, I suspect we're going to see a lot more augmented reality technologies integrated in probably the next few years. And I'd like to conclude this episode with some updates from us at Aftersight, because we haven't done that in a while, and honestly, just because I can't imagine, I don't know, I didn't want to do an entire episode on Aftersight updates, but there's just a couple things I wanted to talk about. First of all, we're approaching the time for our strategic planning, and basically what I'm going to say is we're looking at some new ways to host all of our podcasts. And why I'm saying this is, if you happen to see an interruption to our regular podcasts, that is why. We're trying to kind of figure out a new way to handle programs, including volunteer-read audio editions, and make them go out more direct in podcast form and make them more of a front to back format and less reliant on our broadcast. And we're also looking for new ways to broadcast, because the current software that we're on, I can use it, but it's not the most accessible, and there's just a lot of features that we don't need and that we're not using. And so we're looking at some of those new technologies. Also, speaking of technology, this has been out for a couple of months now, but we've added a new audio edition called Tech Pulse. And if you missed the old business technology news program read by Michael Amy, you're going to love this show, because it encompasses content from Wired Magazine, CNET, and my new favorite, Top Tech Tidbits, all into one 25-minute episode. The volunteer reader Jason Wang is excellent, and you can get that on Spotify, Amazon, Apple Podcasts, and of course our website as well. But it's a great place to get a nice dose of tech news as well. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this episode of Blind Level Tech. Don't worry, we will be back to our slightly longer form episodes, but it seems like you guys have enjoyed the shorter format of these episodes. It's always, the goal of this show is really, of course, to always provide the latest and greatest in tech news for both mainstream and assistive tech, but do it in a way that makes sense to everybody, whether you're, a novice tech user or you're the biggest geek, although we're going to need to have a contest for that. So if you enjoyed this episode and the show, or if there's any other feedback that you have for us, our podcast hosts, or just the entirety of Aftersight, please let us know. You can always send feedback to feedback@aftersight.org. Or if you like voicemails, you can leave them at 720-712-8856. With that being said, stay tuned for next week's Apple Updates episode with Marty Sobo. And thank you guys so much for listening to another episode of Blind Level Tech. I've been your host, Evan Starnes, and I will talk to you guys next Wednesday.